Hello, this week we focus our coverage on the impact of COVID-19 on children and their well-being. More than 168 million children worldwide have missed school due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And here in Indonesia, what's worrying, the pandemic has caused more children to fall into poverty. School's out for Mahda Fikia, maybe for good. The 15-year-old had to quit school in April last year. 1 year on, her family still can't afford to send her back.
Pas waktu COVID, udah nggak kerja bapaknya sama sekali. Anak saya bawa pulang karena saya nggak mampu bayar SPP-nya. Dia nggak sekolah lagi, udah putus rumah aja gitu.
Mahda's father lost his job as a parking attendant after the COVID-19 outbreak hit Indonesia, and he has yet to secure a new one. The family now lives off social aid from the government, but that's far from enough. Indonesia's unemployment rate reached record highs amid the pandemic. Over 2.6 million people have lost their jobs, and the COVID-19 crisis has pushed nearly 3 million Indonesians into poverty. Children are feeling the fallout.
A nationwide monitor conducted by UNICEF in collaboration with the Ministry of Village that covering more than 100,000 poor households identify that more than 550 or almost 1% of the children have dropped out of the school due to the pandemic. And the reason is the economic factor. It's play a critical role in making these children drop out.
Child advocates say some students had to drop out of school and look for work to support their families instead. Others stopped their education to get married.
Nah, bisa jadi orang tuanya menyetujui karena dia juga punya beban. Gitu. Padahal seharusnya anak bukan beban. Karena dia miskin gitu. Nah, kemudian dinikahkanlah anak ini gitu. Berharap anak ini akan dapat ekonomi yang lebih baik, segalanya yang lebih baik gitu. Nyatanya ya belum tentu gitu.
The number of child marriages has gone up since the pandemic struck. Indonesia's religious courts recorded more than 64,000 child marriages in 2020, a 300% increase from the previous year.
KPPA itu sedang menguatkan terhadap aspek ini, Pak, pengurusan dispensasi terhadap ini di pengadilan itu ya, agar itu bisa diperketat gitu, jangan sampai kemudian dimudahkan untuk diberikan izin atau ya untuk pernikahan usia dini itu gitu, seperti itu.
Experts warn that children forced out of school early are at great risk of falling into structural poverty.
Ketika keterampilan berpikir, pendidikan masih di usia muda sudah putus, tidak sekolah, maka peluang untuk memperoleh meningkatkan kesejahteraan secara ekonomis akan terpotong. Nah, kalau sudah terpotong seperti itu, ini nantinya akan menjadi calon miskin. Ketika ini calon miskin, orang tuanya miskin, neneknya miskin, maka disinilah terjadi garis keturunan kemiskinan yang akan sulit teratasi.
There are hurdles even for children from poor families who have managed to stay in school. Schools were ordered to close in March last year, and students now have to attend lessons online. But needy students are being left behind. Some do not own laptops, others have poor internet connections or cannot afford to pay for more online data. The COVID-19 pandemic not only affects children from poor families but also other groups in society. For example, children in a middle-income family in this house are still able to continue their studies, but they have to do it through online learning. Let's find out how these children are coping. Aisha Fitri Az-Zahra now spends about 5 hours a day in front of a computer for online classes. The 15-year-old counts herself lucky. Internet connection in her home in Bekasi, West Java is good. But even she struggles with online learning, and she fears that if virtual classes stick, she may lose out on a proper education.
Kurang juga penjelasan dari guru. Kadang guru juga ngasih penjelasannya tuh secara singkat aja gitu. Kadang cuman ngasih materi doang, nggak dijelasin juga. Jadi itu kesulitannya. Kadang juga ngerasa boring, jenuh. Nah itu bisa juga video call sama teman, belajar bareng dari handphone. Jadi belajarnya lewat via video call. Kalau enggak Meet atau Zoom.
Parents believe the quality of their children's education has suffered since the COVID-19 outbreak started.
Belajar online ini tidak berinteraksi dengan teman-teman dan akhirnya bosan timbul. Kalau misalnya belajar langsung di sekolah, yang saya lihat mereka bisa diskusi, tanya ke guru kalau memang tidak paham, atau bisa dibantu oleh teman-temannya. Kelihatan kerja kelompok lah seperti itu, Pak.
The Education Ministry acknowledges that online learning has its limitations. It has set a target to reopen schools by July this year after all teachers have been vaccinated, but has urged local governments to reopen schools earlier where possible.
Mohon bagi daerah-daerah, terutama daerah-daerah yang sulit mendapatkan sinyal internet, sulit melaksanakan PJJ, tolong sekali para pemerintah daerah segera melakukan tatap muka di daerah-daerah tersebut. Karena anak-anak kita tidak mau mereka lebih tertinggal lagi.
Some schools in low-risk areas have already reopened their doors. The secondary school in Bekasi, West Java, resumed classroom learning in March.
Kami menjalankan atas dasar yang pertama adalah sekolah kami adalah sekolah zona hijau dan anak-anak yang datang adalah anak yang sehat, baik dirinya, keluarga maupun lingkungannya hijau. Itu yang bisa masuk pada hari ini.
The school is treading carefully. Class sizes are limited to 18, a third of normal capacity. Schools had to set up washing points such as this one outside every classroom. This is part of the requirements before schools can reopen. Students are also encouraged to frequently wash their hands while in the school compound and to follow strict COVID-19 health protocols. As children slowly head back to school, Mahda wonders if she may one day be able to resume her education as well. For now, she prays for an end to the pandemic and an escape from the poverty that has haunted her family and now looks set to drag her even deeper into its clutches.
The UK may have the sixth largest economy in the world, but more and more families here are struggling to meet the monthly household bills. Latest research from charities have shown that the parents of 1 in 4 babies and toddlers can't even afford the most essential of items like nappies and food. And the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing more of them to turn to charities known as baby banks for help.
Hello, Rebecca at the baby bank.
Rebecca Mystery's phone doesn't stop ringing. Her number is the link to what's become an emergency service in her community.
Yeah, we can help.
The Baby Bank in Maidenhead, west of London, set up for parents struggling to make ends meet, is helping to ensure children are clothed and fed.
You know, you start to hear sort of the change of tone in someone's voice, and it is usually followed up with, I only need it this week. I won't need it again. You know, I can manage. I just need this. We shouldn't be in a situation where families are having to rely on food banks and baby banks because they've got no access to anything else.
The team has responded to thousands of calls for help during its 6 years in operation. It says the need for its services is now higher than ever before. They're stacking food, baby formula, clothing, ready to be collected by health workers who deliver them to those in need, when other government channels are too slow.
I can kind of send them an email or ring them and they can have something ready to pick up within an hour. which is great. You kind of cut through all the referral forms, all the red tape, and people need help immediately. They can't wait days on end.
According to the government's own statistics, 1 in 3 of the 12 million children in the United Kingdom is living in poverty. 50 miles away from Maidenhead in the London borough of Kensington and Chelsea, poverty eats away at a community that has already experienced tragedy. 3.5 years ago, Grenfell Tower, a 24-storey residential block, caught fire, the flames spreading rapidly via the exterior cladding. It trapped residents and 72 people perished. But for those who survived, who still live in this community, the impact has been devastating. For those still coming to terms with what happened that night, many have turned to space, a community project set up in the aftermath of the disaster that jumped into action again when the pandemic hit.
We set up a community response, delivering food parcels and meals. And in the course of going out, speaking to the community, it was quite clear to us that families with young children were struggling. And that's how the idea of a baby bank came to us. It's just exploded. It's just, I think, it's given parents hope.
You get to know their needs, what is it, what they're going through at that moment in time. And then we can support them before they get into even dire situation where they may need to have a social worker in their life, and it's a different world from here to that step.
2-year-old Bilal comes here with his mum, who told me that even though finances are tight, the centre has meant her children haven't had to go without.
I haven't worked in a year properly. I've worked 2 weeks within the year, so it has been a bit of a struggle and a bit of adjusting to do, but, I had to come to get nappies for my little one. And nappies and wipes, and if there's any, new clothes I can probably get that they have here, and toys, some new toys for the kids. If I can't have certain things for myself, that's fine, as long as my kids, as long as my kids can have what they need. I mean, that's the main thing. That's what motherhood has been about, isn't it? And parenthood.
With its open door policy, all are welcome here, no matter the circumstances.
One of my daughters, she became involved in drugs, and it ended up she's had 3 children, and we've got 2 of them, sort of thing, The cost of nappies and milk and stuff like that are take a lot out of your budget, sort of thing, because I'm recently retired. It all helps.
It's not just the youngest children who need support. Across the city, in the London borough of Islington, 47% of all children now live in poverty, according to the Trust for London, a charity that focuses on inequality. Teachers have reported a rise in the number of pupils eligible for free school meals, and with deprivation affecting a child's educational performance too, school staff are often the first to recognise those in need.
It actually isn't difficult because we know our families so well. So it could be, for example, that a child turns up and they said they haven't had breakfast that morning because they've spoken to somebody that they have complete confidence with. It might be their teacher, a TA, it might be myself at the gate, etc. It could be, for example, that they never have their PE kit, something as simple as that. And yes, we can all forget things, but when it's a regular occurrence, things like that are a warning sign.
The idea of children not having the essentials led lawyer Julia Mayle to start her own clothes bank in Islington in the middle of the pandemic last year. Demand is so great, she's delivered more than 100 bundles to local schools and refuges in just 6 months of operation.
So we tried to include, say, 7 tops, about 4 or 5 pairs of trousers or skirts, a jacket, a raincoat, wellies, shoes, underwear, socks, pyjamas, sort of everything a child would need. Plus we have some sort of generic uniform items as well. We've had feedback from the referrers, and they've been really positive, and they say that the smiles on the children and parents' faces is, really wonderful. So that's been great, and particularly since we gave a whole lot of bundles out just before Christmas, and that was really nice to be able to provide, books and things right before Christmas for children.
That support, those gifts, eases not only the burden on adults, but children too.
The combination of clothing and books, children love books. Children love to read. Children still love to, regardless of what's going on now with the lockdown, it takes them away to a place of adventure. So if they ask for, I don't know, Harry Potter, or they ask for a fairy princess book, they've got that escape. As well as the clothing, they've got that fantasy world that they can go into, and I think that's what makes it so unique.
The demand on charities could grow even further. The government's own forecasters predict that 2.2 million people could be out of work by the end of this year. Among them, parents who will find themselves struggling to meet those household bills. And COVID-19 is wreaking havoc with the economic health of British families.
People who were already precariously on the poverty line or just on it have been tipped over the edge by the circumstances of COVID, be that their work they've been on furlough, or they've been made redundant, their work has ended, or they were on maternity leave and now they haven't got a job to go back to.
The government here says it will offer as much support as it can, but with 1 million more children expected to fall into poverty by next year, even when the pandemic ends, there could be another crisis around the corner. And for people like Bilal and his mum, the UK baby banks could just save the day.
Children may be unlikely to become seriously ill from COVID-19, but they are still victims of the virus. Grief, isolation, parental job loss have all impacted the mental health of the youngest Americans. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say that pediatric admissions to the emergency room for mental health have risen sharply since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, vaccine trials for children are underway. This is as close to her school as 9-year-old Jasmine Mansour is allowed to get. She started as a new student last September, but she's still never been inside the building.
I was looking forward to making a lot of new friends. At the beginning, it's been kind of rough. Like, I didn't know anybody. My teacher, was kind of, I didn't really know my teacher, and it was kind of hard to learn like that.
She's an only child, and the isolation has taken its toll.
If I had a sibling, then I'd probably play with them a lot. And now, I really play games with my mom, and it's been lonely.
For some children, that loneliness has compounded mental health problems. Between April and October last year, paediatric emergency room visits for mental health increased by 31% for children aged 12 to 17 and by 24% for those aged 5 to 11, compared with the same period in 2019, according to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Experts in children's mental health say that schools have a vital role to play in trying to heal the trauma.
It's not just about making up the academic lag that we know we can expect, but we also have to really take the mission seriously that we have to foster students' well-being. So that's with things like mental health screening, mental health well-being check-ins, making mental health part of the curriculum. And so we've been working with, states and schools to do that.
Dr. Hoover says that action is crucial in trying to curb the mental health impacts of the pandemic. She says research from other large-scale catastrophes suggests that they could be long-lasting.
If we looked at some of the data, for example, from natural disasters, when we have longitudinal data that looks at how children fare, even 10 plus years out, we see that they continue, without the proper supports, the extra supports, they continue to experience more mental health concerns, more health concerns, and also some academic impact.
Just opening these doors would be a first step in helping Jasmine.
Before I was excited to go to school to meet my friends. Now the only reason I'm excited to go to school is so I can finish all my work and I have nothing to do after it. It's made me feel a bit lonely and kind of frustrated at COVID.
Despite the name, the walls and doors of Jasmine's school remain closed, and she doesn't yet know when they will open. The longer she and millions of other American children have to wait, the longer the US risks a mental health crisis on a national scale. He's just 12 years old, but Caleb Chung is helping to bring an end to the coronavirus pandemic. He's one of more than 2,000 12 to 15-year-old Americans taking part in a trial of the Pfizer vaccine.
I've been hearing about on the news how there are some people who don't want to take the vaccine, and they don't want their kids to get it. So I feel like participating in this and then demonstrating the safety of the vaccine through my participation could help other people to see that the vaccines are reliable.
His father, a pediatrician, says he's proud of his son.
For him at 12 to have an opportunity to really contribute in such a really profound way, in a way that no adult could do for him, right? This is something that only kids can do. I thought that was just pretty beautiful, honestly, and a real unique opportunity that we had.
It was also a chance to leave the house.
This was a great opportunity for something I could do during the pandemic because I'm usually just doing school.
Of course, the sooner children are vaccinated, the sooner classrooms can open. Right now, many schools across America remain closed, but some are starting to allow some students back in person. But until they can fully reopen, life simply won't be able to get back to normal for America's children or their parents. But the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that with precautions, reopening is safe even without vaccinations.
There is increasing data to suggest that schools can safely reopen, and that safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated in order to reopen safely.
But vaccinations are needed to achieve herd immunity. And with children making up nearly a quarter of the US population, getting them protected is vital. This was highlighted at a recent meeting of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices.
We recognized that it was really important to begin planning for pediatric trials even before adult efficacy trials could be completed. The pediatric burden of disease is not as high as it is in older adults, but it still is significant. And there's both direct and indirect effects to children and all of society. This burden will continue if we don't vaccinate and if we just wait for herd immunity.
Pfizer will next trial the vaccine in 5 to 11-year-olds before moving to the under 5s later this year, meaning that more children will be rolling up their sleeves to help to bring an end to the pandemic.
Little did we realize that children also have been very much impacted by the pandemic. And as the world embarks on the road to recovery, let's not forget to pay special attention to our future generation.